I've done a lot of podcasting, as you know. And people often ask me, how long is your podcast? And I say, it's as long as it needs to be.
Hey, listen.
Sometimes the podcast should be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Sometimes the podcast can be longer, depending on the content, what you're talking about. So I'm okay. I'm happy to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, we're happy to do this, but I saw you, by the way, was it Jason Calley? What's his name? You were just on that podcast.
Oh yeah, I was on the All In podcast.
Yeah, that was good, man.
It was a great podcast.
I like that.
Phenomenal.
So anyway, you obviously met and I'll pass it over to you because there was a lot of things here we talk about and I can control, you know me, I can take over, man. But he's given me a different perspective of you. Actually, and I told you that.
Cool.
No, but a perspective of how a different generation looks at it with the branding. And I didn't understand, like it took me a while to understand how all of that works. So anyway, we were talking one night and he said to me, Francis doesn't wait for media validation. He speaks directly and that's why people follow. So anyway, I thought this was a good person to come on, man. And
you can't rely on others to validate you. I mean, unfortunately, we live in a world. Listen, I love it. There were times where I got a ton of national validation, right? I got a ton of it was one story after another, national story after another, talking about from the best publications in the world. And I think that, by the way, irked a little bit my local newspaper, who felt like I was giving the national press all this attention and all this access, and they felt like they were not getting the access that they wanted. But there were also reasons for that. I didn't feel like they were being fair in terms of the way they covered me. I still sometimes don't feel that way. And they have a great new reporter. I'm hopeful that I can build a relationship with her and that we can change that narrative. I'm always hoping for a better tomorrow. I'm always hoping for a better relationship. It does not do me any good to be in a fight with anybody. I'm not the kind of guy that believes that conflict, is something that's positive. I think, cooperation is positive. I think collaboration is positive. And conflict sometimes is necessary because you have to defend yourself and you have to stand up for yourself. But I don't think it's something that is very productive, to be honest.
No, you once called somebody unflappable, and I'm not going to get into that whole story, who you probably shouldn't have been so nice to at times. So I'm saying that's but that's what you do. It's class,
but at the end of the day, you have a job to do. The job is to get things done, right? And to move the ball forward for your community.
You've always been ahead of Ed Major. Like whether it was social media, whether it was a podcast. I mean, how many podcast episodes did you run?
There was a time where I was doing 3 a week or 4 a week. And there were some times
in the hundreds, right?
Yeah, sometimes I would do 2 or 3 a day. And we did it for everybody. We did it for some of the most exceptional people in the world, whether it was Conor McGregor, David Beckham.
I remember, I would watch
the Winklevoss twins, Magic Johnson, Mark Anthony. I mean, we had some great people, but we also had everyday stories we told of new businesses coming to Miami, existing businesses that were small businesses that were in Miami. Anyone who wanted to tell the Miami story, that podcast was available for them. And we did it for a long, long time. And I think, it was great and people loved it. And then there were some people that were like, oh, what is this guy, an entertainer, a podcaster, or is he a mayor? You know what I mean?
You can please some of the people some of the time.
Exactly.
That's it.
But you can't please all the people all the time. Even though I was elected by 85% and reelected by close to 80%. So,
which I remember in that interview you said, your father told you 80% is 100% in this gig.
Yeah. 262 votes the first time, but then things have changed, right?
Yeah. Listen, it's a grind. And I think those are my report cards, the way I view them, right? My report card is how I got elected. That was my report card on the work I had done as a councilman leading up to my mayoral election. And then my report card as a first-term mayor. And, my report card when I leave will be whatever legacy people remember me by.
It's not over yet, man. Not a eulogy. Sorry to interrupt you.
One last thing, and then I'll take us home with just a couple of questions. You and I talked a little bit about this before we got into the show. Like, what was the biggest takeaway? That was a significant effort. I mean, 300, 400 episodes. I mean, that's a ton of hours that you've decided. And I know you don't do anything that you don't see significant ROI. It has to be positive.
So the idea behind it was, at the time, I was kind of battling with my council. And I didn't feel like I was really progressing. And I think part of the problem for me was that I was a councilman. So when you're a commissioner, and I have to explain a little bit of the Miami dynamics, you're downstairs in what I call the pit, right? Like down there with the commissioners, dealing with day-to-day issues, voting on issues, and doing a lot of stuff there. And so that's a win-or-loss, win-lose kind of situation. You vote on something, you either won the vote or you lost the vote, and it's very competitive, right? It can be very competitive. And you're trying to create coalitions, et cetera. I don't think I got out of that mindset initially. And I got elected by 85%. The first thing I wanted to do was change the system of government to a strong mayor, and I lost big. And it was humbling. And then I was at odds with my council, which didn't really support the strong mayor initiative, and were some older guys that kind of wanted to put me in my place. And did a pretty effective job sometimes, right? So I had to battle sometimes without even a majority, and I was fighting. I vetoed things that I had to to try to maintain my authority.
Or without a quorum at times when there was indictments, but that's another story. Right.
So yeah, that's when I was a commissioner. But when I was mayor, I realized I had to pivot. I had to evolve. And the evolution was, and I remember this, I got to give Carlos Curbelo and JP Chavez, who are dear friends that were counseling me at the time, they were the ones that came up with this idea of sort of what they call the second floor mentality. So the way City Hall is structured, the mayor's on the second floor, the council's on the first floor. The council deals with the day-to-day business, right? They deal with the agenda and passing things. And the mayor's job is to be above that, right? The mayor's job is to set the course, steer the ship, and create policy, broad policy. And so I saw the podcast as a means of doing that, of using what you would call maybe soft powers, like not actual power, right? Like I couldn't say, hey, Magic Johnson, you must be here at the podcast. No, I had to build a relationship with Magic, and I had to come to a place where I could invite him and he would say yes, right?
It works so beautifully. It's so effective.
It was beautiful because I got to weave in these incredible people, whether they be celebrities or otherwise, everyday people, into a story. And this goes to what we were talking about before, Fred. Like, you've got to tell your story. As mayor, you are your chief storyteller of your city's current and future destiny. And if you don't tell the story, and if you don't tell it well, you're not going to inspire people to invest. You're not going to inspire confidence, and you're not going to grow. And so I think what we did with the podcast was we told this story, and people believed it. They were like, oh my God, this is really happening. Miami is really changing. I remember when Marcelo Claure, who we put on the podcast as well, he was at SoftBank, and he said, I'm going to create a Miami-only fund, and I'm going to dedicate $100 million to Miami-based companies. Well, that $100 million turned into $250 million that he ended up investing in Miami companies. And right now, I was just at an earlier a fireside chat where Melissa Medina was saying that according to her tracking, we're 5th in the nation in venture capital funding. 5th in the nation. I mean, Miami wasn't even on the radar for venture capital funding when we started this ecosystem build. And so I think, for us, the podcast was really instrumental in projecting that story.